Okay, Joe Pullman, craftworking.net. This is part 3 of my AT&T Fiasco videos. This video I'm going to kind of give my opinions and don't have the complete facts on this, but this is my thoughts anyway on AT&T on why they do this. So, in the AT&T world, if you think like an executive and you think like, okay, I'm going to be supporting and supplying millions of users, how can I do this most cost effectively? The first thing you want to think about is, or would think about, is that you do not want custom installations. You do not want customization at all. In other words, what you deploy out in the field is going to be the same for every user out there. This is the reason they do this, is that they can give their support staff a very simple script and very basic troubleshooting knowledge. If they try to start getting into custom different installation scenarios, then the help desk is not going to be able to support that. Remember, there's millions of users out there, and most of them, most of you out there just want the basic service. You call up AT&T, you want residential UVerse service or DSL or whatever, dial-up, and then you can, they will come out, deploy very few models of modems, and they're very basic, and they made it so the installation is relatively simple. The first thing about the AT&T modems is actually they're not bad. There's a lot of information out there on people who hate these things like the plague, and but if you look at it objectively and look at it for what it is, it actually isn't bad. It will support all the data rates they are offering. Actually, the thing will actually go up to over a gig throughput. They've got a basic firewall in it. It will do NAT. It will do DHCP. A few other things. When you get one of these out of the box, it's almost pre-configured. Your internet's going to be 192.168.1.0. Your default gateway is going to be .254. That would be one of the main problems. Most people like their default gateways to be .1. That can be changed, but AT&T doesn't like it too much. But that's some thoughts on it. So, but first of all, the AT&T modem is got some extensions, or let's say options, in the PPP protocol that make it very, very difficult, if not impossible, to deviate from that. And I've tried this. I actually have a DSL WIC card that goes into a Cisco, and I actually tried to hook it up one day and get it to work. And layer 2 would come up, LCP would come up, but I could not get it to give me an IP address for the life of me. Did some debugs, did some Wireshark captures, and when you look at it closely, some of the options are there that make it not negotiate an IP address, and that would be the ICPC protocol. And there's some interesting Wireshark captures for that. But anyway, after a few hours of this, I abandoned it. Went back to the AT&T modem. The second of all, again, back to AT&T, they don't want to support other people's bring your own device gear. So if you decide to try this, it won't work, but AT&T will not support anything but their equipment. So even if you did get this to work on something else, then if there's a problem with it, you're on your own. AT&T will just say, you know, fix your gear and have a nice day. So, but anyway, back to the installation, or back to the configuration of these modems. For most people, This is fine. It is set up in a router. It does have everything turned on, including Wi-Fi. You can turn it off, but go through when you decide to mess around with one of these, because you're going to be using your own firewalls. You do have some basic configurations that you can change. You can turn off the firewall, you can turn off DHCP, you can turn off NAT. What I found is that even if you do turn some of these features off, it still is going to do it. In fact, I have not found a way to turn off NAT. And if you are not careful with this, and I've had mixed results on getting some of this to work, is that because you can't turn NAT off and you've got NAT going on in your firewalls or your router, that you're going to end up doing double NATing, and it will screw it up. So keep that in mind when you start working with this. And if you do try to call AT&T and turn off NAT, they're going to basically say, well, this is how it's set up. We can't change it. You know, don't do what you're doing, or try to do what you're doing. But if you're like an engineer like me and you want to start getting into more of an enterprise environment, and you want to basically use the modem just as a pass-through gateway, it's possible. Personally, my setup is I've got the modem in pass-through. I've got everything turned off, NAT, DHCP, Wi-Fi, and that's going into my virtualization. Or actually, it's going into the directly wired into the firewall, the Cisco 3845, and that's where I would you set up your default gateway, and it will work. And in this scenario, I didn't have a problem with NAT. I do have NAT set up in the firewall, the Cisco. I do have port forwarding turned on. It's working. I'm not having any problems with it. Throughput's fine. Just remember that from the last video that I'm using static IP addresses, that the modem has an internal fixed IP address that they configure for you off your public space, and then you are going to put your default gateway on the public side on your firewall. Then you're going to put a route from your firewall back to the modem, a default route, and just be careful, because you may end up with double NATing. But back to the AT&T points, in a static environment, it's not very intuitive on how this thing actually works in pass-through mode. In pass-through mode, or layer 2 mode, you're thinking this is all it's doing is translating Ethernet to WAN PPP. There's no IP addresses in it. You may have an IP address in it for management. Because it's got the last IP used, that's how you manage it. You just get a web browser and you go to that particular last IP address in your public range, and actually that works. It's in there. But you're thinking, how does it route to AT&T? Because you have a fixed IP range, and it can't be subnetted, so everything you're doing, you're sending a default gateway, or all your traffic to the default gateway, eventually to the modem. How does it get to AT&T? There's no IP address, there's no routing, there's no IP address that's configured to route from your public space back to AT&T, and how does this magic happen? And I could not get an answer from AT&T initially, and then later on I did call them and I said, we're going to sort this out. And what it is, in the configuration of the AT&T modem, they do have their public space. It's like a 23 address or something, and which you don't configure. You can't configure, you can't change it. So what happens is, in the PPP negotiation between your modem and AT&T DHCPs a static IP address, or a dynamic one it would be, to your modem. and this is put up, and it does show up, and I asked, what is this? And they couldn't explain it to me until later. It says, yeah, that's the AT&T side of the network that you route to from your public space. And I said, okay, great. So that's how that works. And but then again, now it's a router. It's routing, and you set this thing up in pass-through mode, which means at the end of the day, this is not doing pass-through. It's a red herring. I don't know if it's what the differences are between the routed configuration of this modem and a pass-through, but if you're using public space, I don't think there's any difference. In this coming up, I'll experiment with this a little bit more to see what this thing is doing. But in my personal case, because now I have to do this differently, is that I'm seeing a double NAT going on, and what it's doing, it's working. It's doing its thing. I don't see this double NAT going on. I do see the NAT translations going on in my router. But when I actually do a speed test through it, and this is actually a virtualized firewall, is that my speed is going from 50 meg down to 5 or less. And because of the weirdness in this, and I can't see what's going on in the firewall as far as NAT goes, it's hard to do a trace on it. I'm going to try to see if I can't get some more information. I just may end up ditching it. But the key points is AT&T, give them what they are. I would do it their way. If I was smart enough to be a CTO at AT&T, I'd say, yeah, let's set up a situation where we give no control to the consumer. We set up the modem for basically one size fits all, and for most people, they don't care. They don't want to know the technical details at all. They just want to go in there and have the thing work. So that's why they require a technician to be out on site, so they can basically hook it up and be done in a few minutes and be out the door. So it's the way I would do it. Being an engineer, if I were to do an enterprise solution, then I would basically go strictly by specifications and teach my technicians and engineers on how to fix this stuff. But when you talk to AT&T with a technical problem, they sound like the dumbest people in the world, and actually they are, because they are not trained to do anything more than the basic troubleshooting. They do have Tier 3 support. In my case, since I was calling AT&T almost every day and complaining about this, that, and the other thing, I actually ended up in a situation where I was a preferred customer. And instead of talking, I would call into the front desk, the 8080 number, say I have a technical problem. They would immediately send me to Tier 3 support. They wouldn't even talk to me. They would just send me on. That actually was a good thing. These guys know a little bit more, not much. And I'll get into more of the drama when we talk about IPv6. IPv6 with AT&T is a train wreck at best. But IPv6 is so slow and being adopted that they don't care about that. So, but anyway, I'm talking to the Tier 3 support. It depends on who you get. And I was talking to these guys when I was getting my IPv4 public space set up, because what normally happened is you call them up, you want public space, then they won't give you your IP range. They just said, oh, we're going to turn it on next week or in a few days or whatever. And they'll give you a date when they're going to send somebody out, or they're going to send or turn this on. So you end up waiting. And then when they do come out, they don't know what they're doing. Then you call them up and you say, what's my IP range? They give you, and for my example, when I called them up, they gave me like a network of a /16. I'm going, oh, perfect. I ordered a /28. You're giving me 16? Great. Of course, that didn't work. So anyway, after I've done this twice now, and every time it took me at least 3 calls to AT&T to get at least the right IP subnet range. But once they turn it on, your other internet connection breaks, and you're stuck. You have to get this working. So you call up AT&T and you get the right IP address. You learn how to go into the modem and set this, and it can be set. And you power down your modem, you power it back on, and hopefully the first thing you want to do is ping the internet and at least get that part working. And then hook it into your network and change your IPs and get your routing set up. So, but that's a little bit on AT&T's philosophy on how they do this. They want simple configurations, somebody who can troubleshoot this who is not an engineer, and this is the way I would do it because it's a lot cheaper, and you can get problems resolved very quickly because you're not dealing with bring your own device. So. But that's some thoughts I have on the AT&T philosophy on how they do this. But anyway, you can change it. You can do some basic things, and I'll take you through that in the next videos.